Hello Pixies, and welcome to or back to my channel. It's Zoe here, and today I'm going to be talking about my winter TBR. I know I've been making quite a few TBR videos lately. I had my end of the year TBR up in December. I also had my general 2025 TBR up within the past week or so. But now we're going to be talking about my winter TBR for 2025. Instead of doing monthly TBRs, I'm going to be doing seasonal TBRs like I was doing last year. I had a summer TBR as well as a fall TBR. And the reason I like to do seasonal TBRs instead of monthly TBRs is that I am largely a mood reader. I like to read what I want to read. Doing a monthly TBR, it's just too much pressure to read these books and do this and do that. But with the seasonal TBRs, I have a selection of books that I can read between the times of January and March. And during that time, I can also read other things that I would like to. Because while I do want to read all these books, I am a mood reader and I just want to read the books that I want to read when I want to read them. So I like giving myself that little bit of flexibility. Here I have 10 books that I would like to read this winter, so let's just go ahead and get started. First up, I want to talk about the two books that were on my on my 2025 TBR, because there's quite a few books on that list and I would really like to accomplish my list, so that means I need to read at least 2 of them during the winter. Might read more, it all just depends. I'm just going to go ahead and get them out of the way now because you've probably heard me talk about them before, and if this is my first video that you're seeing, you can click up in the cards and it will show you my 2025 TBR. To not bore you if you have seen that video, I'm going to talk about these books first. And first up, I have Graceling by Christian Kishore, and I have talked about this book so many times on my channel already. In this world, people are largely regular, but some people are born with graces, which is an extraordinary ability. And our main character in here is Katza, and Katza is niece to the king. She's just supposed to live a privileged, unworried life because she's related to the king, so she has a lot of money, but she's not directly related. She's not really expected to do much. However, when she is 8 years old, her grace reveals itself and she has the grace to kill, so then she is taken to her uncle, the king, and is used as his personal assassin. Now, I've actually read this book before, but I don't really remember too much of it, to be completely honest, and by mean too much, I mean not at all. Not at all. And I really wanted to jump back into this world this year, and I also received Fire for Christmas from my lovely partner. So maybe I'll get to that this winter as well, or maybe I'll read it some other time. But Graceling is definitely on my priority list, so that's why it's also the first book mentioned in this TBR. And the other book from my 2025 TBR video is the book of Living Secrets by Madeline Rue. And in this book, we follow 2 school-age girls, and they are obsessed with this book called Moira. And even though they tried to reach out to the author to receive answers to the questions, they remain elusive and never reply back. So they just reread Moira over and over and over again, and Moira is like a fantasy romance book. And one day they are offered a deal by a stranger that they're like, I can put you inside the book of Moira. And so they take this deal because who wouldn't want to live in the world of their favorite novel? But when they get there, not everything is quite as it seems, and there's a darkness lurking just under the surface. So now they have to figure out how to get back to the real world and how to survive Moira. I just love the sound of this. It's got that gothic fantasy thing that I'm absolutely loving. I want to read more gothic fantasy. I'm so excited about this, and it's jumping back into that kind of jumping into books and about books. And I just want that, and the cover is absolutely beautiful. I've talked about it before, but I just love this cover. I think it's really interesting. And now with those books out of the way, we're going into other books that I would like to read this season. First off, I have 2 rereads because I love rereading, and both these books I haven't read in a really long time. And they're both a part of a series I would like to continue, which is why I want to reread them because it's been such a long time. And the first book is a book I've talked about again, quite a bit on this channel, and that is Winter Song by S.J. Jones. And in this book we follow Liesl, and Liesl is a musician, but she is a girl, so she cannot really pursue her musical passions, but she has a younger brother who's also a talented musician, so she is also teaching him how to play. But when she was younger, she accidentally made a deal with the Goblin King that she would one day be his bride. But now that she is older and he has come for her, she refused, and he has taken her sister instead, and now she must go to the realm of the Goblin King in order to get her sister back. I love this book. I also love this author. I think she's very underrated, but I love this book. I love this author, but I've never read Shadow Song, and I would really like to, and it's been such a long time since I've read this book that I just really want to dive back into it. And it's Winter Song, and it is very, very wintry, which is why it's on the winter TBR. And I'm really excited to have this. I actually recently got this book. I didn't own it before. I've never seen it for sale anywhere, and I found a copy, and I'm just so excited to be reading this book. It says that's like that's dark, romantic, and powerful on the back, and I gotta agree with all those things. Again, I love a twinge of gothic in my fantasy, and I think I wouldn't describe this as a gothic fantasy, but I think it has a twinge of gothic, if that makes sense. And then I have A Breath of Frost by Alexandra Harvey, and this is a bit different. So I read this around the same time that I read Winter Song originally, and I've also read this book twice and have never continued on with the series. But this is kind of a historical fantasy with a murder mystery plotline kind of book, because in this book we follow Emma Day, and Emma keeps coming across these bodies of other girls who are going to be entering the season. I think it's set in the Regency era, but I could be wrong, but that's always what I pictured. She keeps finding their bodies, but then she figures out that she comes from a line of witches and witchcraft, and so do her two cousins, and so now they must embark on a journey to learn about their magic, even though it's frowned upon and not really safe to practice in this world, because I believe it is set in our world, if I'm not mistaken. I've only ever read the first book, and I've read it twice, and I really enjoyed it both times, but I've never continued on with the trilogy, which is the Lovegrove Legacy. There's 3 books. I've only ever read the first one. The second one's sitting on my shelf over there because I bought these from a library book sale a couple years ago, and I still haven't gone around to reading the second one. But yeah, I'm really excited to continue on with the series, and I hope I like it as much as I liked it the first time around reading it. And now continuing on the same kind of historicalness of these 2 rereads, because Winter Song is also set in Germany, I have some more books that kind of have that historical fantasy vibe, because that's just kind of what I'm feeling this winter. And first up on this list is a book I would say I know the least about, but I'm excited for nonetheless. And that is The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reid. And if you don't know, I am absolutely obsessed with Juniper and Thorn, which is also by Ava Reid, and I also really loved A Study in Drowning, which I read in 2024. I loved that book. I thought it was really great. But I've never seen anyone actually talk about The Wolf and the Woodsman, and this was her debut novel. And in this one, we follow this woman who has been chosen by her village to be the king's blood sacrifice, so then she is taken away by this group of people. But then when she is captured, things go wrong. I think they all get separated, or they all die, except for her and one person in particular, which I think is the woodsman. And then so they have to figure out how to survive this really barren wilderness by themselves with just the 2 of them, and it kind of leads to a romance, I believe, and I could be totally wrong about all of those things. As I said before, I don't know a lot about this book, but because I love Juniper and Thorn so much, and I also really enjoyed A Study in Drowning, I want to read more of her backlog, and I'm really excited to read her future books as well. So I definitely want to be reading this one, and it just once again gives wintry vibes. It says on the back here, inspired by Hungarian history and Jewish mythology, this unforgettable debut follows a young pagan woman with hidden powers and a one-eyed captain of the woodsmen as they form an unlikely alliance to thwart a tyrant. I don't know much about it going in, but I'm really excited to know more. And then we have one that I think almost everyone has talked about that came out in 2024, and I want to be on the hype train as well, and that is An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. In this book, we follow a young woman who is starting to go to college, and she is either in a writing program or a poetry program, but she comes across Carmilla, and Carmilla is older than her and beloved by the poetry department, but she becomes Carmilla's only rival on her skill level. And so they have this rivalry, and there's also a professor who's also getting mixed up with the two of them. And this is a dark academia with a twinge of fantasy set in the real world, because I believe this is set in Massachusetts, which I absolutely love. And this is a retelling, or I would more so say a reimagining of Carmilla, which is an old vampire novel that came out before Dracula did and was said to be one of the inspirations for Dracula. And Carmilla was also inspired by the New England vampire panic, which is when those vampire books got really popular. People have been raving about this book. People have been absolutely loving it. And I want to join the train. I want to be part of the club. And that darker, moodier vibe is something I'm really excited to dive into. And I don't know if this one's historical or set in the current time, but it's giving me historical vibes, which is why it's in this category. So hopefully I'm not wrong about that. But who knows? What do I know? I'm talking about books on the internet. What do I know? And next up on the list, and the last one for this more historical fantasy category, is The Golem, and I believe it's pronounced The Genie. So The Golem and the Genie by Helen Wecker. That's a lot of things I'm probably mispronouncing in this one. But in this one, we follow a golem and a genie, and they both have worked their way from their homelands to the world of New York, where they're living along like human people and trying to keep their true selves hidden. But they come across each other by chance, and they can be themselves with each other and form an unlikely friendship because their fundamental natures make them very, very different from each other. But then they are separated by a circumstance that I have no idea what it is, but then they are brought back together by someone with some not so great intentions. And this has been on my TBR for a really long time, and it's a part of a video that I've been making for longer than I've had this channel. So it's really important for me to read this, and it's just giving wintry vibes. I don't know if it's the cover or the more gloomy prospect that's giving it to me, but I'm really excited about this one. And a librarian once told my mom that this is a really good book, and I feel like if a librarian tells you it's a really good book, then it's a really good book, because usually they don't have much comment on what at least me and my mom check out. I don't know much about this one as like the other ones, but that doesn't dim my excitement at all. I have 2 high fantasy books on this list, and the first one I want to talk about is East by Edith Patu? I don't know how to pronounce names, I'm so sorry. But in this one, we follow Rose, and Rose wants to be adventurous and go outside and go on adventures, but her mother doesn't want her to do this and has basically been keeping her locked away, and also there's something to do with her birth being special, which is why her mother has kept her basically hidden from the world. But then one day a bear shows up in the late autumn and tells Rose to come with him to his home, and if she does this, he will make sure her struggling family is better taken care of. So she goes on this journey, and this is where her adventure starts. That's kind of all I know about this one, except for the fact that this is a retelling of East of the Moon, West of the Sun, which is a Nordic fairy tale, and this is a part of a duology. And I have both books, actually, so we'll see if I really love this one, so that I can continue on with the sequel, West. This is really going to be a book that feels like a fairy tale, so I'm really excited about that. I love books that have fairy tale feelings, and also I just love the concept of redoing this fairy tale in particular. And it also has complete and utter winter vibes because the bear comes at the end of autumn, so at least the beginning of her journey is going to be in the winter, and he is a polar bear. So what has more winter vibes than a polar bear is set in the winter? Like, seriously. I've heard that this is a really good book, so I'm excited to see where it goes. And then I have actually a middle grade book, and this one's also a reread. So maybe it should have been in the reread category. But I haven't read in so long that I don't even remember what happens in these books. So it's basically like I'm reading it for the first time, because I read this when I was a child. And that is Into the Land of the Unicorns, which is the first book of the Unicorn Chronicles. Now, I don't think I got very far into this series. I think I may have gotten to the second or third book of the series, and I think there's a lot more books than that. This one's fairly short. The second one's longer, but I would say this one's like almost like chapter book length, except it doesn't have pictures, obviously. But in this, we follow Kara, and Kara, I believe, is from our world, but then she takes a leap into this other world, or like portal or something, and comes into the world of Glimmer, where she makes friends with, not Glimmer, where she falls into the land of Luster, which is like another more magical world. And in this land, she meets Lightfoot, which is a young unicorn that she quickly becomes friends with. And then she has to go on a quest to find the Unicorn Queen, because there's a mysterious man following them, trying to reach the queen, and wants the destruction of all unicorns. This is more of a nostalgic read. I do love a middle grade, and I haven't read like a unicorn book in a really, really long time, so I'm really excited about it. And it's just, I think it's gonna be really good and nostalgic, and just something a bit lighter, because I've got a lot of serious books on this list, a lot with more darker twists, so I'm excited just for a good old middle grade adventure. And the very last book on this list is Back in a Spell by Lana Harper, and this is the third book, I believe, in the Witches of Thistlegrove series. Am I right? Yes, I am right. This is the third book in the Witches of Thistlegrove. In this one, we actually follow a Blackmore, and Blackmores are kind of looked down upon in the first two books of this series because they are really powerful and they tend to be a little bit selfish, and we've had some not good characters be Blackmores, but this one we follow a character we haven't been introduced to before. I really love the first two Witches of Thistlegrove, which is kind of shocking because they're not necessarily my vibe. They're very contemporary romance with fantasy in them. Like, I wouldn't say they're romantasy. They are, well, maybe they are romantasy because it's romance first and then fantasy, but set in our world. So is it romantasy or is it romance with a twinge of fantasy? I think that's a better explanation for it. But I really enjoy them. I really enjoyed Payback's a Witch and From Bad to Cursed, so I'm really excited about this one. And this one is actually set in the winter as well, so it's just like, ooh, another wintry read. And I think this one's a bit lighter and a bit more fun with the plots compared to some of the other books on this list, so it'll be like a nice breath of fresh air when I'm reading this, and I'm really excited to get back into the Witches of Thistlegrove. And in this one, we not only follow this Blackmore character, but we also see more of Morty, who has been a side character in the past two books, and I really like Morty's character. I think they're really, really cool, so I'm excited to see where this story goes. And that is it. That is my winter TBR. Those are the books I am planning on reading this winter season. As I mentioned before, I am going to be reading more books than just what's listed here. You're going to see some of these books in videos, but don't expect to see every single book here in a video. That's just not realistic for where I am right now on booktube, because reading is my main hobby. But I am planning on doing videos with some of them at the very least. In an ideal world, I would like to do videos with all of them, but it's just not realistic. Leave down in the comments below any books that are on your winter TBR, or if you have opinions on any of the books that are in my winter TBR, I would love to know. And you can also give this video a like. I would really, really appreciate it. And you can subscribe if you like. I'm trying to keep the ball rolling from December. Yeah, so I guess that's it. So I guess I'm signing off now. Okay, bye.